Yeah, you know we on this Are You Down podcast.
Oh, we are
Coming to you live off iTunes.
straight up tunes.
Alright, yo, let's get this intro. Are you down with cooking now? Got the people starving. Rob's been taking all them shots on that James Harden.
Throwing darts like Brady, these dudes is just straight incredible. Girls be eating Connor up, call him Julian Edelman.
RNC, we on this pod, ballin' like Shaq and Kobe. Talking NBA and football, man, all you people own me. Got that Boston bias, we are the best, we pound for pound.
And this with a question, let me know.
Are you down?
Oh man, it's no Will Smith, but it's pretty nice.
All right. Thank you for that beautiful song to start out this podcast. I am Mike Reeder. I have been on this podcast before, but Rob and Connor have been nice enough to let me lead this one. Today we are going to talk about music's involvement in sports. So let's start off right away. I went to school for music education at University of New Hampshire. So I have a bachelor's degree from there, and then I am studying music therapy at CSU right now. So, Rob, can you talk about your musical background?
So I majored in economics and have no music background whatsoever, except for casually listening to it.
Cool. What about you, Connor?
I have 4 or 5 years now of sport management. Got my undergrad at Salem State, and I'm currently working my master's degree in sport management. So I also have zero music experience outside of listening to it on occasion.
For you usual listeners of Are You Down, we're going to be straying a little bit away from the NFL and NBA to start off, just so we can talk about running and working out and things like that. But then we will get into it in the later half. And then the second half of this podcast, we will be talking about Celtics, Patriots, everything that matters to us in life. Okay, so let's start off. So you guys don't have musical experience, but you kind of understand what music means, right? Like, Connor, what do you think? Like, you can kind of see that the whole world's been affected by it, right?
I mean, there's music in everything that goes on in the world. There's music in cars driving by, in the wind blowing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it's really interesting because you can talk about like the perception of what makes music and things like do you hear birdsong as a song? Do you actually hear that? Like when you hear a bird chirping, you're like, oh, that was beautiful, or you're like, no, that's just noise. It's stupid.
Well, I think it's almost like an ambiance, or like, I like to see music, and we can talk about this as we talk about like working out and stuff. Like the sounds we hear is almost like a soundtrack to our lives. That's how I see it.
Ooh, that was very deep. Okay, so let's get right into it. Let's talk about working out. So, Rob, how about you go first? Do you like to listen to music when you work out?
So I listen to music constantly when I work out. I have big overhead headphones that I listen to while I'm working out. And I really use it as kind of a way to draw my attention away from the stress that I'm putting myself under. I don't listen to music in sort of a typical way to relax like most people. I usually listen to music in order to get my heart rate up, in order to wake up, in order to get going. So I think that kind of crosses directly into me working out, where I'm trying to escape into the music as opposed to feel the stress of lifting weights.
So you actually use it for the physiological purpose of it.
That's correct. I listen to mostly rap music nowadays, and most people actually think I listen to rap music because I like it, and that's not true. I pretty much don't like rap music. I just like the fact that it has heavy bass and really repetitive beats that you can just kind of simply fall into, as opposed to more complex music. Not to crap on rap, but more complex music doesn't really have the simplicities that rap does.
What a rhyme.
Okay, Connor, what about you?
Like if I'm working out and my headphones die, I am leaving the gym at that moment in time. For me, like Rob said, it helps drown out like the other stuff. Like I don't want to hear the dude next to me grunting through his set. And it also does serve as like a pre-workout kind of thing too. Gives me that boost. I listen to the music and listen to the words and really drive off of that. Cool. So like I'll make my playlist geared around certain song, whatever song like really inspires me at that moment to help me get through workouts.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, and as someone who kind of has like dedicated their lives to music, I do have a lot more trouble just using it as a physiological purpose. And it's like because I do get distracted. I get really distracted. I listen to a lot of stuff. So sometimes that's really good for me, then sometimes it's the worst thing. So I actually don't like to listen to music when I run because, and I understand that it's like there's a physiological response, and like that's great if I want to build up my heart rate, but it's just too distracting for me, and I'm too like in depth. And like when I listen to an album, I know exactly how long a song is, so then I know exactly how long I've been running for. And if you run for like 8 miles, which I try to do sometimes, like if you know every 3.5 minutes, you're not in a good situation by the end of that run. So, and I did some research on this and like why we want to, and it has to do with our perception of music and how we respond to it and what it means to us in society. But for music, it's really, there are 5 key components to it. And it gives us disassociation. So, I mean, we all know what disassociation is. We are not thinking about it. So it's the exact opposite for me when I'm running. Arousal regulation, synchronization. The biggest thing, and Rob actually pointed out, which is great, and which is why you use rap when you're working out, is that it's that rhythm. The rhythm does everything for you with how your motor functions are being responding to it. And then acquisition of motor skills. Do you guys know what gait is?
No.
So gait is like the consistency of your step. So like when you're working with like a Parkinson's patient, you're really focusing on trying to give them an appropriate gait when you are playing music for them. So that's like a really big concept, is to help that rhythmic aspect of your walking, because we're walking in a motion. And when we talk, we have like a flow to us. We have a rhythm to that too. So really the rhythmic aspect, it helps with the motor skills too. And then attainment of flow. Look at that transition perfectly into it. Attainment of flow, again, we just have this consistency to it. And that's why these new amazing apps they have now, where you can actually set up a playlist and then you can set your heart, like the beats per second that you want to have. Nope, beats per minute, not per second. And then like you can actually go to that flow, which is really amazing. So do you guys know what dopamine is?
I've heard of it.
I think it's a chemical in the brain. I'm pretty sure.
Are you reading the notes for this?
No, dopamine. It's released when you're feeling good.
It's the anti-stress hormone in the brain.
Yeah. Well, cortisol has to do a lot with stress, but dopamine is that pleasure chemical that comes in, or the neurotransmitter that comes in, and it's reward motivated behavior. So that's what working out is. I mean, like that's everything about it. So dopamine's really running this whole show, in my opinion, when we're talking about music involvement with working out. So now let's go on to the next section. Let's talk about like kind of the perception of music and its involvement in our society, specifically in sports. So agree with me if you can think of any other topics, but I thought about the players listening to music before warm-ups, the stadiums just having music going the entire time, and then I want to talk about the Knicks game, and I want to talk about things like Allen Iverson having a rap career. So let's talk about players listening to music for warm-ups. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory, right, guys? Like, they're just trying to pump themselves up. They're trying to get that physiological response to it.
Yeah, I think.
Can you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think athletes use it to try to. I would say probably find a middle point. In a pregame scenario, you might be nervous, you might be excited. Having something that you can relate to, and something that, like you said before, it can help you kind of disassociate from where you are at the moment or what you're doing. And maybe enact a little bit of that dopamine in your head from the familiarity. It helps them find that kind of middle line, kind of pull back to the median, so that they don't go into the game too amped or too nervous.
Yeah, I think it's really cool because it's more. I think the players aren't just listening to those high intensity songs or like EDM to kind of make you pump iron a little bit faster. I think there's more to it. It's about creating that world and that aspect of that world just to tune things out, because you're at such a high level. You have millions of people watching you on the TV or something like that. You want to do well and you want to get in that mentality. They're a lot like, I think the players are a lot like actors when they're coming for like their warm-ups. You got to get in that world. I always think like those method actors are really amazing when you pretend like you're someone you're not for an entire day. Like, well, they do it for entire 6 months or something like that. But, I mean, that's kind of what you got to do. And I think music's really affecting that because of how it stimulates our brain. let's talk about consumerism. Let's talk about like how so Connor, you've gone to sports events, right?
Yes.
You've gone to
I've gone to them. I've worked them.
Is there ever a second when there isn't entertainment going on?
Well, so it's kind of, I was looking at the notes for this pod, and I actually was like, I worked the music for a couple different like middle school tournaments last year, and like was in charge of like making a playlist and like having music queued up and ready to go.
It's stressful.
It is. It's also because when you're in an environment like that, there can never be you cannot not have noise. I can't remember what the term is, or like you can't have
dead air.
Whatever. There can't be a moment where there is dead air, whatever you want to call it. So like as soon as play stops, like for a basketball game, as soon as like a timeout or like a dead ball, you got to have a song ready to go. And it's kind of a fun game to play because I'm not a music guy, so it's kind of fun to see like what will get the crowd going and like what won't, and how you can. You also play to the players too during warm-ups. You're playing songs that you know that they might listen to, but then during timeouts, you're playing songs that you think the parents might enjoy. It's always trying to find that balance because you want to maintain that entertainment. Sports and music are I see them both as art, and it's kind of ironic that you have the players who I would say are artists as well in their own domain, listening to other artists in that music domain, and they kind of play off one another.
Deep.
Yeah. Are you gonna go, Robbie? You just want to
No,
say
deep. Well, I was gonna say, I think music in the stadium is almost like a marketing technique for these companies. A lot of people just see it as kind of rah-rah noise in the background, particularly someone like us three, where we are very, very big sports fans. But I think we all know someone that we're friends with who doesn't really like the sport that they're watching, but they go to games.
Absolutely.
We can all think of maybe a girl or a guy that we've gone to a game with who doesn't particularly like baseball at Fenway Park. But they'll sing Sweet Caroline.
Experience.
They'll sing Sweet Caroline every gosh darn time they're out there.
Oh goodness gracious!
So I think music in that sense can kind of keep people into the game. It can keep people's spirits up with that beat and that rhythm, and it can reach a broader audience by kind of smoothing over those low times in the game.
Oh, yeah. For sure. I mean,
Absolutely.
I worked promotional. Like sorry, Mike. I've worked game days for like a couple of minor league baseball teams, and like some of like the hallmark moments where like your promotions had music in the background. We'd always do like the YMCA at like I think the bottom of or middle of the 8th inning. We'd always do the YMCA to get the crowd involved, and like you'd be dancing, the music would be playing. It's almost like sub entertainment for the product that's on the field to engage those fringe fans, as you were saying, Rob.
It's releasing those. It's also releasing that dopamine, and that's like super important.
You get excited. You're excited to be there.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think it's completely a marketing technique because, like, music, you can manipulate minds with music, which is pretty amazing. And there's a lot of positives to it. And they're also, like, music can be detrimental. I mean, like, if you think about, like, we were just talking about pumping up our hearts. Like, I have a personal experience, like, last week of just music just being terrible for me because it was midnight and I was trying to go to sleep. And then my roommates were downstairs listening to heavy metal. And, like, I could feel it through my body, like, just being miserable. And it's because of the effect that music has on it. And on my, like, and I was, like, literally tensing up. It was causing my motor function to tense up. But, like, you can use music to, like, in forms of consumerism. And, like, if you're in a place where you want people to speed up and shop faster, you play faster music. You play upbeat music. If you want them to stay longer, you play like quieter music. And the crazy thing is that they do studies on this, and then you don't realize. Like that's the thing that blows my mind because it's like the whole concept of time and like how we have this perception of it. It's like time flies when you're having fun. Like that's not true. I mean, time's still going at the same time. But like, but by the use of this stuff, like it really feels like you're like life is inconsistent with the speed of it.
I like want to go to a store now and like focus on that, but I know like if I focus on the music, like I'm not gonna like get the same effect because I'm focused on the music instead of focused on my task at hand.
Yeah, it's really interesting because a lot of things I'm learning a lot about the brain and what I love about it, and like I learned about like the auditory pathway and like how we hear. It is so interesting because like as I'm like it's happening as I'm learning about it, and it like freaks me out. And then it comes to the point where I'm thinking about that so much that I'm not paying attention, and like I don't know what to do. Like I had a class on attention, and then I found myself not paying attention because I was thinking about it. Like they were like it was bad. I learned a lot about myself, and like they're like, how often do you think you lose attention? Like, what is the common rate to lose attention in like a lecture set?